I just need that loud. Okay, Monica, stop and stop. If you're not gonna be able to be quiet, we can't engage with you. Okay. All right. All right. All right. Hey guys, welcome to the Sea Planner. My name is David. I'm your host. I'm sitting here with another guest. Her name is Kaelly Arellano. Um, yeah, why don't you just introduce yourself and let the people know, because I might just completely not, like mess it up. So if you
Yeah.
could just tell us all that you do, and we can go from there. Because I think this episode is really important for not just myself. I usually get so much out of my interviews, but for the people that and the just everybody that listens to this podcast, they're gonna get something out of it. And I appreciate you being here. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm really nervous, but I think that this is really special, and I really believe in storytelling
Mhm.
and sitting across the power of like sitting across somebody, which is probably why I do therapy, right? And so I guess for those listening, I'm Kaelly Arellano. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I currently live out in LA, but I am from the desert. That's where I was born and raised, and I'm very proud to be from here.
Mhm.
And so what I do now is I have a group practice. It's called K&B Therapy Inc. And we provide therapy services, so mental health services for individuals. I also do group therapy. That's something we've been doing. We started recently,
Mhm.
and it's just been really, really cool. I think that basically what I do is I sit with people and we talk about different difficulties that they're having. But what's really cool is that, when I look back at when I was younger, first of all, therapy was never talked about.
Yeah.
and and if you heard any mention, it's like es para los locos, and like that's
Right.
really not it, right? And so it's really, really cool for me to be a therapist and to see how it's actually not something scary, and that it's for people like you and me,
Right.
and it's more or less like this, and it's not only people who are in crisis. So I don't know. I'm excited to just kind of talk to you and see kind of where we go with it.
So what really um pulled you to want to say yes to this?
To say yes to this,
Yeah.
you know what? I think that first of all, I was really excited to talk to you. I
Mhm.
feel like we haven't talked in a really long time,
Mhm.
and I think I knew you from when I was little.
All I remember is swimming parties, your dance recitals,
Oh yeah.
um, and just I think just hanging out. Like I think you're my brother, around my brother's age. I mean, we're
Yeah.
not too far off,
Yes.
but as soon as I left high school, I lost contact with a lot of people. Went to
Mhm.
school, did all that. You went to what school as soon as you got out of high school?
Yeah, I went to UC Irvine right out of high school,
Mhm.
and there I got my psych and social behavior, my bachelor's in
Mhm.
that. And then after that, I went to UCLA for my master's in social welfare. So I'm a social worker.
What really pushed you to that? Because, I mean, your parents really focused on giving you like self-confidence, like even through dance.
Yes.
Your family was really, close.
Yes.
You grew up with your cousins, so you weren't like a lonely child. What kind of pushed you to that?
You know what? That's a really great question. And I love that you said all that because sometimes when people, this one person asked me once, Keely, if I had to ask you about your heart,
Mm-hmm.
what would you say? And it was such an interesting question. I'm like, what? If I had to talk about my heart, but you just talked about my heart.
Right.
It's like you're talking about my family. You're talking about how, like, the values that was, like, were instilled in me, which
Mm-hmm.
was confidence and, like, also that if I could dream it, I could do it,
Sweet.
and we are very, very close knit. So I'm very family oriented. And so I guess to answer your question, though, about what got me into this field, if I'm honest, we were in high school, right? And people are getting ready to figure out what's next in life. And I honestly didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And it was scary, but I knew that I wanted to go into like the helping field.
Okay.
Um, I remember being with the counselor in high school and talking about how I wanted to go and, become a therapist or do counseling. And she was like, no, like, don't do that kind of thing. But I just felt like I felt it in me that that was something that I could do, and so I did it. And honestly, I think for so many people there's so much pressure. It's like go and get your education. That's something I always heard and I wanted to do myself. But to decide when you're 17 years old what you want to do for the rest of your life, that's kind of intense,
It
you
is
know?
very very hard. Grandmother, I remember your grandmother pretty vividly. She's pretty traditional. How did she did was she very encouraging to go to school and to become very empowered? And because usually a traditional Mexican um, woman kind of falls in line with a lot of traditional, like taking the back seat, not really speaking their mind. How did see I feel like it's like such a different, you want to help people, but um the traditional role is to be quiet, to not speak for yourself, to not empower yourself. What were your family like, what were your family's um I guess their
Like values?
no, like suggestions? What were their, like,
Oh,
hey
okay.
Kaelly, like, why are you doing, like, did they ever ask you
Yeah.
that stuff?
You know what? To go back to my grandma, because it's so interesting, you're right. I think in many ways she's very traditional,
Mhm.
but in other ways, David, my grandpa passed away when my mom was 3 years old.
Oh, okay.
So my grandma was, I think, like 30 years old,
Oh,
when
wow.
her husband passed away.
That's great insight.
So it's interesting because tiene esa mentalidad, right? Like the
Right.
the traditional beliefs in many ways, but in other ways she doesn't, because at 30 years old, more or less, I don't know the exact age, more or less, she had to
Make
do
decisions.
make decisions for her and her family. She had to be the
Oh,
breadwinner.
I get
She
it.
was the first person in her rancho to, drive a truck, to, I kind of think of her as like her little mini entrepreneur. Tenía un abarrote, right? Like the
Mhm.
little tienditas,
Mhm.
little stores where you sell things. And, she would also go, and they had land. And so they would do a lot of like agriculture, and she was out there doing it. So it's interesting because my grandma does have a lot of traditional beliefs, but then also she was an empowered woman,
Okay.
maybe not even by choice, like she just had to go do it.
Right, she had to play that role for her family.
Yeah, exactly. So my grandma never questioned me going, and neither did my mom. My mom always wanted me to go and, get my education. I did get, I think my mom did ask me once, like, are you sure this is what you want to do, mija? Like, are you even going to make money?
Right, okay.
And
That's pretty much what parents want. They're like,
yeah.
they want you to be independent, to get to a point where you don't have to work with your hands. You know what I mean?
Yes. And so she did ask me that, but besides that, like, my family has backed me and been supportive of me
That's
a
great.
100%. I think even when, I was in the middle of a pandemic, when I decided to quit my job, and, with my business partner, just a great friend too,
Mhm.
Brandon, we decided to establish this private practice. It's like that was such a risk, but my family really said, do it, go for it, and I think that's really special, and I'm so grateful in that way.
I noticed that you came out of the gate like full force. A lot of friends, like I was talking to Marcel,
Hmm.
and he was telling me, like, he's like, man, I should go do therapy with you, because
Yeah.
he's engaged. He's constantly watching your stuff, and he's like, man, that's very mental health is very important, especially for us as men.
Mm-hmm.
When I was in high school, going into college, I remember being scared of making a decision, like you said, and my first option was, oh well, architecture, because my dad did architecture. So
Mm.
my whole thing, 3 years in high school, was doing all this stuff to become or get credits for college. And
Mm.
I realized, like, no, I kind of like panicked. It was like from night to day, and I realized that's not what I'm doing, and I changed course. Of course, during my undergrad, I the whole time I was still thinking, like, is this something I want to do? Always hesitant, always questioning what I was doing. But I really liked it. When you started your undergrad, did you have that throughout the whole time? Did you mm, did you still feel strongly about what you were doing? Like, were you still on that path, or did you ever question, like, should I even be doing this?
You know, it's interesting because I think with honestly the pandemic, I think I've stopped to really reflect more myself about my journey or even going into private practice, like
Mhm.
having these types of conversations. I'm like, what was I thinking, you know? And, you know, what I can say is I think throughout my experience, you know, from, you know, undergrad to grad school, I feel like I take decisions a lot with like where my passion lies. And I feel like I knew that por ahí andaba. Like it's some I'm gonna go this way and somehow I'm gonna figure it out, right? Were there moments where I was like, am I gonna be able to do this? Yes. I remember, you know, I remember studying so hard for my very first psych test, right? So the psychology class and I was like, man, I've never studied this hard. Like I'm gonna ace it. And I didn't. I really didn't. I really didn't. Like I mean, I didn't pass. I didn't pass that test. It was like a failing grade. And I remember calling my mom and I was crying. I was like, Mom, college isn't for me. You know, like it turns out college isn't for me. And she was like, tranquila, you know, like stop it, you know, you can do this. And I was like, yeah, but I studied so much and look, I failed. And she was like, yeah, you did study a lot and you're going to have to figure out a different way to study. That doesn't mean you can't do this. You're just going to have to figure out a different way. But I remember in that moment really being like, no sé, you know, I don't know if I could. It was less about can I do this field
Mhm.
and more about can I do the things that are necessary to get there, like do
Okay.
well in college, right?
Right. So, let's see. Um, were you a good student? Like, were you like good grade student in high school?
I would say I got good grades. I feel like a lot of my friends really cared about grades, and so
Mhm.
I think that I kind of followed suit. But I don't know that you know, I see my sister. So my sister's like 9 years younger than I am,
Mhm.
and man, she's just like so dedicated to her schoolwork. The type of dedication that she has to her studies, I'm always impressed, and I'm like, there's no way that I was doing that at her
Mhm.
age. You know, I was really focused on doing well, but I was also involved in extracurricular activities, right? Like I was in choir and musical theater and cheer and ASB. So I was doing good in school. Like I would get probably A's, maybe some B's, kind of like good grades,
Right.
right? Like I was getting good grades, but I don't know that me aplicaba, right? Like I wasn't like that, like I'm gonna study.
You think that's why you did bad on that first
I
test?
think so. You know, I think that something that I did is, you know,
Coast it.
you know,
Probably because look, there's a difference between there's different types of learning. Like you
mhm,
learn, you're like a book smart, where
yeah,
you learn, you can regurgitate everything that you learn,
mhm,
or you learn concepts and you can kind of you're able to teach it after you learn it. Just
yeah,
because I don't know how that works. I really never really learned any myself. I can be honest. I never really learned anything in school because um, I would see something, especially like I'll give you an example for like math class.
mhm,
You learn the equations, you get to the result. I'd skip all that because I'd do that all in my head, and then I'd get the answer.
mhm,
So it wasn't a challenge. Like
mhm,
school for me was more hands-on. It had to be hands-on because otherwise, like I was stuck in ELD classes till I was in eighth grade. I
mhm,
was even now I feel like I'm dyslexic.
mhm,
I'll hand the phone to Monica and I'll say, here, type this, because
mhm,
I can't put stuff, like it just gets all jumbled up.
mhm.
Um, oh, I don't know where I was going with this, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that uh, school that school setting, the book smart isn't for everybody, but you can be smarter than anybody. What would you say to those that are in that position where they want to do something but hate um the whole book thing, the whole
Yeah.
having to go to class? Well, I just find it hard because I went through school. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree, and I hate school. I hate the whole institution, or how they teach school.
Mhm.
I would love to figure out a way for our generation to do something. Either it's through communication like this,
Mhm.
learning like or listening. But the traditional for me is like I try to steer away from it.
Yeah.
I don't steer people away from it, but I don't you did, even you went and you got a master's.
Mm-hmm.
So I applaud you for
Oh,
that, but
thank you.
how long did it take you to do that?
It took me a total of 6 years. So I went straight through, like right after high school, I went straight through to, I didn't take a gap years or anything. So I went straight to college. And then right after, I went straight to grad school, right?
So you got 4 years plus 2?
Yeah. So
Oh.
6 years total. But I guess to your question of like, what would I say? You know, I think that what you're bringing up is that, yeah, like, because you asked, was I somebody who was like really doing well in school before I went to high school? And I think that, yes, and also I don't think I was set up in a way to really be fully successful in college, but I think that I was doing fine, I guess, in school. But for those who are struggling to do it the traditional way, I guess, going straight to school, I mean, I think it really also depends on like, what is it that you want to do?
Right.
I think for you, it was, you knew at some point, it's like, I want to do things with my hands, right? Like, I'm not going to sit here and do math for the rest of my life, but it's just something I have to get through. And so
Right.
I think for different people, there are certain careers that you just need to get that little paper, right? And then you can kind of go and do things. But then for others, there's so many other ways of building a career. I mean, like, you're talking about, Marcel, right? And I think it's amazing what he's doing here in the desert and business. And I think it sometimes it's like you can't teach like that hard work. You can't teach grit. You can't teach. Those are things that you can't teach. But I think for those who are like, man, like for what I want to do, I need to go to school. I think it's really staying grounded on like, why am I doing this? So it's like I'm having a hard time and I'm struggling, but like, why am I here in the first place? I think you also talked about, you're like, oh, I was an ELD for a long time, right? And I think that's another thing is that sometimes people think that I'm not smart. That's not it. You're a smart person. It's just we all learn differently. And sometimes what happens is that we don't know the resources that are out there. Like I have clients who are first-gen students and also have disabilities as far as like writing, or they have like ADHDs, making it super difficult to be successful in grad school, right? And so it's like they start to think, is there something wrong with me? Maybe I'm not smart, maybe whatever. We start to tell ourselves things about it, but it's not that. It's that we all learn different, and there's this one system of how it, everyone's supposed to make it work, right? And I think for those people, it's like, no, you can do it too. It's just about figuring out, okay, this is something that I'm having a hard time with, and are there resources for this? That's something I really learned about when I was an undergrad. I think I came from being here in the desert where I felt so much support. We talked about how I'm really, really close to my family, but I also felt like I had a great group of friends. I felt supported. Right. And then I went to Irvine, and I felt so alone.
Because it's in an industrial city, it's just business. It's not really like, you don't really see families. It's just hustle and bustle.
Yeah, I also didn't see very many Latinas, and to me it was like, I don't know where I fit in here. I also, at the time when I first went to college, I wasn't necessarily a partier, so I was like, okay, so like, what do I do here, and it was really, really hard, and I felt very lonely, and I guess what I had to learn at the time, and I remember my mom telling me, like, Mija, like, go and ask for help, like, if you don't know how to do something, go ask for help, see somebody who's doing it, and go ask. Pero me daba pena. I was like so nervous to do that, right? But with time, I started to learn, you know what, if I don't ask for help, then things are I'm going to continue to feel stuck. And so I started going to office hours, or I started to look at what are some things that could help me. And in looking for support, I actually ended up working at a counseling center. So
that's great.
Yeah, these are other things that it's just like, it was solidifying, like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. We called ourselves life coaches. And so it was really a course that we were taking. It was like every single week, 3 hours. It was like 3 hours, 3 hour long class. And we were learning skills to then be student coaches. Meaning, let's say that you were in college and you were really struggling. You were like, man, like, I'm the first in my family to go to college. I miss my family. I don't know where I fit in. Plus, I'm failing all my classes. And so we as students, right, we would set up things like this and we would talk about it and we would figure out different skills or different techniques that could help you specifically. So if you're somebody who's like, man, I can't, focus to save my life, or I'm so like unorganized, we would sit and be like, all right, like tell me about your day, and let's figure out something that can work.
Would those be one-on-ones?
Yeah, those would be one-on-ones.
Would you be looking forward to like having Latinas or Latinos or Hispanics
I sure
in
was.
those? Were you always like kind of looking for those? Because everybody has different cultures. You
Yes.
have Caucasians have complete different.
Mm-hmm.
So it's even Asians, like they all have different cultures, and
Yeah.
so sometimes me growing up, I had like, and I would always angle myself towards what was comfortable for myself. So I would
Mm-hmm.
always spend time with people who spoke Spanish
Mm.
that liked the commonalities, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so did that help you also break certain stigmas that you had for
Mm-hmm.
people? Like, because that's when you first started doing one-on-ones, or like
Right.
seeing kind of like that was like your test run.
Mm-hmm.
How did those go?
Well, it was interesting because at the time I wasn't a therapist, right? So I was just like coaching more or less, right? But at that time, it's like I would be really excited when there was a Latina or, Latino guy who would sit with me and we would talk about like, oh, my mom, this or whatever, like that we could relate, right? But it was also really interesting because I didn't get to pick,
Mhm.
what students were going to be assigned
Oh,
to
okay.
me, right? And so what I learned though is that we have more similarities than differences. I even think about my business partner. He's Asian American, and we are like, he's so family centered, and it's really cool because I'm Latina, and then I talk to him and he talks to me about his culture, and there's more similarities than differences, but we don't sit down and talk to people or hear them out. And I think that it was cool because I was realizing, all right, like here's this girl who isn't Latina, she's black, and she's having the same experience in the sense of like, I don't feel like I belong here, right? Or, yeah, just all sorts of cultures, right?
Do you ever get people to tell you like, who are you to tell me, or like,
Mm,
obviously a lot of these people come to you because they are open to like suggestions,
sure.
or opening up. But do you ever get people being like, what do you know? You're just a girl, or you're just a, do you ever get that?
Yeah.
Or you have never lived what I've lived through, or something like that, where it's like kind of like they're
Yeah.
trying to.
So before doing private practice,
Mhm.
now we're fast forwarding to I already graduated and like from both bachelor's and master's, and then I'm now working, right?
Okay.
And I was working at a community mental health agency where we were providing
Is
therapy.
this in LA? So,
Yeah, this is out
yeah.
in LA.
Okay.
Uh-huh. And we were providing therapy services to there it was like kids, teens, and their families.
Mhm.
A lot who were actually the Latino families, and sometimes I would go into their homes and we would talk. And there was where I did get that. I would get that from las señoras, like, ¿tú quién te crees? ¿Tú tienes hijos?
Mhm.
Right? And so it was that I did get. I don't really get that now with my private practice clients because I feel like they're coming to me and it's because they want to be there and they want to do this. But I think with las señoras, it was different because, yeah, they would ask, like, ¿usted está bien joven? Like, how are you going to know about life? How are you
Right.
going to tell me about what to do and not to do? And I think that my response with that was always like, I'm not your expert. You are your expert. And that's why we're going to work together. And that's how I see everybody.
Oh, that's a great angle. So the way you approach it is very passive, where it's like, I'm not here to judge you or to put blame on you. It's like
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to fix something.
Yeah, I think that my job as a therapist isn't to judge. My job as a therapist is to help you understand
You
yourself and figure out what's working and not working for you. And so sometimes I would have moms who would come to me and they're just like beyond, right? And like really the kid would be coming to my therapy, right? So here I have a kid who's like doing all sorts of things, being super disruptive or all sorts of different situations, and then I'd have a mom, right? And what we would get down to is like, you're really tired and you're really stressed out and you're really overwhelmed, and I'm not judging you. Like, your kid is having a hard time, but we can all together work this out. Like,
Right.
let's figure out what works for you. Hey, here are some things that I think you could try out, but try them out. And if they don't work, let's figure something else out, right?
Do people shy away from that responsibility? Because a lot of people, a lot of the time, it is personal, like
Mm-hmm.
taking responsibility for yourself and your actions.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people love to put blame on others and
Mm-hmm.
and their surroundings, like being first generation, saying like, well, my parents did this, or my parents called me burro my whole life. Like, how do you narrow it down to just like that person? Like, hey, yeah, all these outside factors, let's just focus on you and like you taking responsibility. Do you
Mm-hmm.
ever approach it that way, or do you have to kind of be
Mm-hmm.
more or less like?
I mean, I would say that
It just
there's
seems like you have to be like a mental ninja to, because there's so many you you know for instance, me, when I want to get my way, I want to, I'll break down the situation and I'll look at it on the pro and like
mm-hmm.
my own version, and then I'll try to come up with like 5 or 6 different alter like finales of what the conversation might be.
Yeah.
Do you get that a lot? People always trying to find excuses or reasons to not take ownership.
Yeah, of course. I think change is hard.
Right.
Right. Like, change is really hard. And so, of course, we're going to have resistance, even when we come to therapy, right? Like, I'm ready for change. But then when we talk about what change would look like, it's like, ooh, maybe not, like maybe not. and so, I think it really, I don't necessarily, I think it depends, right?
Right.
But
And it's not just a one-time sit down, right? It's
No.
like you're building on
Yes.
the conversation.
if I'm honest, I think the first month of having therapy is really just getting to know each other,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, it would be difficult to just have change happen from one session, right?
Right.
And so the first month is really us just getting to know you, right?
Mhm.
Like, tell me what you're about, tell me about your family, tell me about what you do, why do you do it, kind of having these conversations, because
Self-reflective. Very.
yeah, and just kind of getting to know that person and them getting to know me. I feel like in therapy, I really bring myself into it, and I
Mhm.
think every therapist has a different style. I crack jokes with my clients.
Mhm.
We laugh. I mean, I have such a good time. I really do. I really, really enjoy the people that I'm seeing, and sometimes I keep it really 100. Like, hey, you said you were going to do this last week. What's up? What happened?
Yeah.
Oh, no, pues, whatever, right? And it's like, all right, well, what do you think about that, right? And so it's not, again, I think that whole month or the beginning stages of building that relationship, it's so that we can get to a space where I can be straight up and I can say, like, hey, listen, like, this is what you said you wanted, but this is what I'm seeing. What's going on? Like, what's
Mhm.
happening, right? I don't know if I answered your question or where we even.
That's okay. I would like to. You've been speaking Spanish, like a Spanglish style. Do you have that a lot in your practice? Where do you have to focus? Do you do practice in Spanish? Do you do your?
We
you have,
do. I mean,
let's see. Did you have to take classes in school for that in Spanish?
I didn't.
No. So then,
I wish they did.
that would have been
That
cool.
would be really cool.
Because all the terminology, all this other stuff, I think in Spanish all the time. So it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard for me
Yes.
to. I'm constantly always translating my thoughts, and then I speak in English. So I always have a hard time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I've cut that out. I used to speak a lot in Spanglish,
Uh-huh.
but I realized that um, the way sentences, they're structured in Spanish and they're structured in English. So it's like completely like backwards, you know?
Yeah.
So I get more jumbled up.
Yeah.
Like my wife's like, "Oh, you guys should speak in Spanglish." I'm like, "Oh, dang! Like I don't know if I can." If it's gonna be in Spanish, it's gonna be in Spanish. If it's
Yeah.
gonna be in English, it's
Yeah.
gotta be in English.
No, I would say a lot of my sessions with
Mhm.
clients are in Spanglish, or there's just some things that.
But you're also in LA too, like
Yeah.
so that's like the norm.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. I've had not right now, but I've had señoras that come to me that the session is entirely in Spanish.
Mhm.
But I think even when there's things that I don't know, it allows us to be like, you can teach me something too. Like, señora, ¿cómo se dice esto? Right?
Oh,
Like, and
okay.
then I'm describing what I'm
Right.
meaning. I'm like, oh, I can think about it in English, but what is it? Ay, esto se dice así. Oh, okay, yes, that's what I'm saying. You know.
Do you do a lot of your practice in the inner city where you have a lot of people that?
Well, right now I'm providing telehealth, so teletherapy,
Hmm.
which is everything is through, like, think of it kind of like a Zoom,
Okay.
which is really cool because you know what, when we decided to do our private practice, we started to look for offices. The
Hmm.
pandemic then hit though. So the pandemic hit and we were like, well, should we go and rent a place? Like, I don't know. So we didn't. We held off on that and we
That's great.
started seeing people through telehealth, which is what really all therapists, I would say, transitioned into.
No overhead.
No overhead, yes, which is great.
Yeah.
And what's also really cool is that it broadened who we can reach. So
Right.
whereas before, maybe if we were just doing office work, it's like los que están en Los Angeles, right? Like who's in LA, that's who I'm seeing. But now I see people who are from the Bay, Bakersfield, San Diego. I even have people from the desert, Riverside. It's really cool. So I see them through the screen. So
Is that all you do, or do you do like classes or group
yeah.
sessions?
So we do group sessions also. The most recent one we did was a therapy group for therapists
Hmm.
because, hey, you know, even us as therapists, we need that support. So we were doing therapy groups for graduate students who are training to become therapists. Why? Because when we go back and think
Hmm.
about what we would have needed, hello, like that was so different, you know, being in grad school, learning so much and reflecting on your own family
Hmm.
and providing support, not knowing what you're doing. It's like, oh my gosh. So we decided to establish a group for therapists in training.
Oh, that's
And
very cool.
there's all these therapists from all around California talking about esto es lo que me pasa. This is what's happening for me. This is what I'm worried about. Like, oh, me too. And then we talk about skills. Like, what can we do to figure this out
Hmm.
together, right? It's super cool. As far as like workshops and presentations, like I can't wait. I know that I said I was really nervous to come here and talk to you, and I was, and I feel
I
better
don't
right
think
now.
I don't think you are anymore.
But you know, it would be a dream for me to one day do presentations like to
Hmm.
schools, to like mentoring. You know, when I was in grad school, one of the things that I would talk to a professor about was how if I decided to continue education after that, I really wanted to look into research about bullying,
Hmm.
because I saw the effects that it had on my sister when she would get
Oh,
bullied.
really?
Yeah, and so I feel like I would talk to my professor and I said, I really feel like schools are doing a disservice to the students.
Hmm.
She said, what do you mean? You know, and I said, you know, we have like those weeks where it's like bully free zone. We have like these posters that say like, you know, zero tolerance on bullying, but there's bullying at every single school.
Or at every single level,
Yes,
like.
even as professionals,
Hmm.
right? And so,
Even in within your own family.
yes.
I'll speak for myself. I'm the first. I'm the oldest, and so that pressure
Mm-hmm.
of like doing certain things so that my younger brother, my younger sister like follow
Mm-hmm.
that pressure. I feel like it's like a form of bullying too, where it's
Mm-hmm.
like, hey, if you don't do it, like you suck, or
Mm-hmm.
you're not living up to your potential, or
Mm-hmm.
just even certain suggestions that, for instance, my parents make, the way they make them, I feel like they're kind of twisting my arm,
Mm-hmm.
and that's, I would say that's a form of bullying, because you're being, I don't know. Is that, am I off, or am I
No,
wrong?
you're not off. You know what you're talking about is like this dynamic that we
Hmm.
have as like first gen
I'd love
children.
for you to kind of
Yeah,
also
you know,
go
like
into that.
us as first gen. So when I think about like first gen, it's like when you think about your parents, you know, came from their homeland
Hmm.
here, right? And you are the first generation to be here fully, like be born and raised here,
Right.
right? And I think that experience is really different, right? Because our parents had to have plenty of sacrifices, right? And they're very real, right? But I think that they're also bringing their roots,
Right.
right? And so with bringing their roots, they have now brought us to a place where we have to kind of balance both, you know, culture and then also how do I fit in here?
Hmm.
Like the ideals
Modern
here.
times.
Right. And so I think what you're talking about is just like family dynamics
Hmm.
and boundaries,
Okay.
right? And in I always joke with my clients, like when I have like different, women who come to me and like, I mean, mama this, or, and and we joke, and I'm like, what are boundaries with a Latina mom, right? And
Yeah, I
like they just
know.
start laughing, like, aha, like, yeah, right.
Tell me about it.
But I think it's like it's hard, right?
It is.
Because what you're talking about is, as the eldest, I'm also the oldest in my
Mhm.
family, or with me and my sister, but there's like this pressure for us to,
A sense of obligation, right?
yes, like to just kind of figure it out, to know what you're doing, to do it the best. And I'm sure that it maybe comes from our parents, but maybe it also comes from us, like
Mhm.
we want to be good role models, right? Or
True.
we want to maybe, for me, I think of it like I would love to pave the way so that my sister, it doesn't have to be as hard for her, like
Right.
that when she thinks about like applying to grad school or college or an application, a resume for a job, like that she doesn't have to like scramble. I didn't know who to go to with that. Like my parents are extremely supportive, but they couldn't help me with how to study for a test, or they
Mhm.
couldn't help me to, do a personal statement. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
I had their emotional support, but they couldn't support me in a different way. And so I think what you're talking about is like this pressure that sometimes comes from parents, sometimes also comes from us.
Right. I agree with you. I think I created a lot of those um pressures for
Mm-hmm.
myself. Um in a sense, you were trying to I feel like I thought that if I got this diploma, I can like pay off my parents
Mm.
and just be like, all right, cool. Now I can make decisions for myself. But it doesn't work like that. I
Yeah.
think the struggle is within. I think it's okay to struggle. I think one of the most beautiful things in this world is to go through challenges and overcome them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just like this podcast, I think that um, putting myself in a vulnerable position where I used to not talk to people, I used to think all these things and push people away.
Mm.
And now I'm like, no, like feed me, nurture me,
Yeah.
all this stuff. It's very wonderful. But I faced that challenge, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like now I can tell people like, hey, the one of the healthiest things is to express yourself.
Yeah.
It is to overcome your weaknesses, the things that hold you back. I don't know. I really appreciate having this conversation with you.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully whoever listens to this, they get a little glimpse of what you do.
Yeah.
I don't want to end it, but I also do want to focus on the first generation, like you said.
Yeah.
Could you give me a little bit more information on that, and how people can how people can use you as a form of empowerment towards their own life.
Yeah. Yeah. You mean like how people can access me for therapy, or just in general?
Oh, maybe you can give maybe
Like example?
another example of like
Yeah.
when, because you're talking about how geez, I'm stumbling with all my words. Let's
It's
see.
all good.
It's just that it's a lot of
There's so much to talk
I have
about.
to process everything, and
Yeah.
you want to throw me a lifeline here? Do you have a question? The audience?
A ver, Monica. Come on, girl.
I know you've been itching to ask a question, so. Oh, that's great.
That's a really great question.
So can you repeat it? What did you say? What was it? Why'd you, why'd you get into this field
Field.
of work, and how you can impact the older? Oh yeah, yeah, that is.
Ooh. How
You
did
know,
you come up with that name, by the way?
um, I was talking to, if you want to go back to my second interview, Daniel from Canvas,
Oh, yes.
Daniel Neve.
Uh-huh.
He's just always been in and out, like helping me grow. And we went to a show. We went to an art show,
Uh-huh.
and he was sitting with us. Me and Renee were sitting down, and he was just kind of like just spinning my wheels, just
Mm.
and he's like, "Oh, I just plant seeds, man. Like I'm not telling you what to do, and I'm not in a position to tell you what to do."
Yep.
So he's like, I just go around plant seeds in your mind. He's like, I literally like to see somebody's potential. Like, I ask them
Mm.
a little bit of questions and see what their objective is, and then I just like throw a hint,
Mm.
like, just plant a seed and walk away. And then
Yeah.
my whole thing was like, dang, this guy just blew my mind. And
Yeah.
so I took that little phrase,
Sat
and Renee's
there.
like, yeah, you are a seed planter. Like, I am in my own way, same as Daniel. Like, love to like live kind of vicariously through other people and their achievements and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I was like, hey, maybe I can do the same thing, go around and kind of like inspire others to grow and have them explore their. A lot of the time when people sit here, I don't know if it's like subconsciously, but now they're in a position where they kind of have to live up to the things that they say,
Hmm.
and not just on the mic or on
Yeah.
TV, but when I do have conversations with them, I'm like, this and that, and then I'll check in with them. That's
Mm.
watering my seed,
Yeah.
checking in and
I love
constantly
that.
like, turning the soil and showing uh shining light. This would be me putting the sunlight on my seed,
Love
and then
that.
they grow a little bit. So I use that as a kind of metaphor for our mind and our spirit. So going back to what my beautiful wife was asking, why did you get into this, and why would um, maybe well, how was the question again? Why you chose this career path? And oh yeah, and how do you want and why do you want to impact? Oh, and
Yeah.
then also the older generation, like, what's up
Yes.
with this older generation?
All right. Okay. Oh, you know, why did I get into this field? I think that it's like such a layered answer.
Mhm.
And I also think that with time, I almost feel like I'm adding to my why,
Okay.
right? Like I almost feel like when I first started, like I mentioned when I was in high school, it was like, I know I want to help. I know I like talking to people. Okay, let's do it this way, right? But then, it was just like as I was doing things, or as I was exploring new things, I was discovering um como te diré, like,
Because you're a social worker,
I'm a
right?
social worker. And let me tell you how I got into social work,
Mhm.
because again, I only thought, okay, if I want to do therapy, I have to go be a psychologist, right? Which, by the
Right.
way, there's differences. So there's a psychologist, a marriage and family therapist, and then there's a social worker.
Mhm.
We can all provide therapy, but we're coming at it from a different lens,
Mhm.
right? So, like many of us, like maybe all those three would say, I provide therapy, right? But we all come from a different lens. And so when I was in undergrad, I was thinking like, okay, after this, I have to go and get like a PsyD to become a psychologist.
Mhm.
I had a mentor at the time, and he said, hey, there's this position to work with kids. I wanted to work with kids.
Mhm.
Cool. So I applied to it, and I ended up working at a domestic violence shelter. And so there I was working with women and their kids. And so what I discovered there was not only just so much about the strength of women and children and teenagers, but I also discovered social work. I thought social work, like when you think about like school, I mean, I'm sorry, movies, what you think about, what I would think about as a social worker is like the people that like snatch the kids,
CPA.
CPS, right? So
CPS. Yeah.
Child Protective Services, yeah, and so that's what I thought it was, and
That's all.
so
That's all you thought it was.
right. And so when I get there, the director, the hotline, the therapist, the case managers, this whole place was run by social workers.
Oh.
And I
Okay.
said, hold up, like, hold a minute, hold on a minute. And I just fell in love with that work. I think a social worker comes at it from a different approach than other therapists, because we're looking at systems, we're looking at environment, we're looking about just like how everything impacts a person.
Okay.
Whereas, well, okay, I'll leave it there. And so, long story short, while working there, I thought, you know what? I want to have the ability to work doing any of these positions that people have here. A social worker is also able to work at a hospital, able to work with the government, able to work
At a
at school, private practice. So I thought, and I know about something that I knew about myself is it's hard for me to stick to one thing, because I get inspired and I get excited and I'm like, oh, this, I can do this. Okay, I'm gonna do this too, right? And so for me to think about
It didn't limit you.
yeah, I didn't feel as limited, and so that's ultimately what got me there. But I think for me, I feel incredibly, incredibly blessed that I grew up with so much support.
Mm-hmm.
I know that many people don't. And so for me, it is so, so powerful to be in a space where I can believe in somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I always say, I think it takes one person to believe in you. And so it is not, there's nothing more beautiful to me than to, like, at the end of the day, even if I had a really shitty day, to know, like, I sat with somebody today and they were contemplating their life,
Dang, yeah.
and they were on their last, like, their last straw, right?
Yeah.
And that we got to have a powerful conversation. And to me, that's really, really beautiful and really powerful. And I don't believe that, I just believe in the power of connection, right? And so my hope is that with time, that not only our generation is really informed about mental health, because we all have mental health. I have mental health, you have mental health, your beautiful wife has mental health. We all do, right? But I think a lot of the times, especially when we look at older generations, it's like I said in the beginning, right? Like, terapias para los locos, and that's just, like, not it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we have mental health like we have physical health. Mental health is health,
Yeah.
right? And so, like, I just hope that with time we're able to really normalize mental health is real,
Mm-hmm.
and mental health comes from so many different
Even
reasons.
this is
Yeah.
mental health.
Yeah, like, we just, mental health is just being able to nourish our mind, our body, like how everything is all connected,
Right.
right? We experience so much in life. When we think about just even this pandemic, that is a collective trauma, right? And so the impact that this pandemic is going to have and is already having on people is unreal. Like the anxiety, the depression, the losses that people have had is intense, and so I think what happens with older generations is that, like, traumas occur, but they just learn to keep going, and then, like, and so then it's like they didn't learn to teach us to slow down, to process. They just learned to, like, continue to go, right? But I think that there's a limit to how much we can do that. There's only so much that we can experience as people without saying, hold on, like, stop, like, wait, what just happened?
Do you think the pandemic, regardless of how crazy it was, it kind of lifted that veil for a lot of people? Because in my position, I feel like it brought my family closer. We were able to enjoy each other because time slowed down a lot more. I noticed that you didn't speak about the relationship like therapist, like the marriage therapist. Was that just because you shied away from that just because it would box you in, or
Yeah. You know what? I think that igual, maybe because I was the first in my family, I didn't necessarily have, like, like, for example, if my sister was to go into the field and say, like, I want to be a therapist of some sort, I would be able to sit with her and say, like, Lex, these are the different routes that you can go if you want to be a therapist. This is what a psychologist can do. This is what a marriage and family therapist can do, a social worker can do. I didn't really know, I guess, about a marriage and family therapist. I guess I just kind of went straight to, like, how do I become a psychologist?
let me ask you, when you have conversations with your mother, does the way you approach it, do you approach it as a daughter or do you approach it as, like, a therapist?
That's a really good question.
Because some people, like, within their relationship, like, let's say you said you have a boyfriend, does he feel like you know what I mean?
No,
Does he feel,
don't be my therapist right now. Just listen to me, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, here's what I can say is, like, the truth is that a therapist can never provide therapy to, like, friends or family. Why? Because there isn't.
So you have to turn that off.
There isn't, like, that line, right? Like, when we talk about, like, there isn't that line. For me, I think I am a therapist. That is a role that I have, and so I have that perspective in my head. But I'm also a human,
Right.
So it is one thing for me to be able to think clinically about something, and then there's another thing when, like, my mom or somebody's telling me something and it's really getting under my skin, or it's really affecting me, making me sad personally. Like, it's hard, right? Because I'm a human being too.
Right.
So when, this is something funny. The other day, my boyfriend was telling me something, and I was struggling to kind of like, okay, ¿qué le digo? Like, what do I say? And I said, okay, hold on. I said, so I said, do you want me to just tell you like my candid thought, or like, do you want me to tell you what I would tell you if you were my client, And he was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, here, let me tell you what I would tell you if you were my client. So, I think I'm really aware that
Because that mentality can take the drivers, the role of like every scenario you start breaking it down like that.
Yeah. It's funny. Like, I think one of the most annoying things people ask, but they don't know. They think it's funny is like if you were to tell somebody like, oh, I'm a therapist, like, oh, are you psychoanalyzing me right now? I'm like, no, I'm not getting paid for that right now. Like my heart, my energy, like I need to preserve it. So no, I'm not like psychoanalyzing somebody all the time. But I think that with my family, I think sometimes being a therapist allows me to, on my own time, like be able to increase my empathy or like understand like
because I thought about it completely the opposite, the where it kind of distance you from your family and say like, they don't get it. I told them, but they just don't understand. Like no, it completely is the opposite.
I think it allows me to. I think also almost to my detriment. Like I think I feel so much. I think I'm an empath, and I think that sometimes if let's say my mom, right? My mom is, I'm like, here's my mom. If my mom is having a hard time with something, I almost feel like I inhale that, right?
Okay.
And so I think for me, when we go back to family dynamics or we go back to just being an oldest child, right? Like I think I have to be able to remember, and I talk about this with my clients a lot, is our parents are strong. Like sometimes we don't give boundaries or we don't say, hey, eso no me cayó bien, like I didn't like that or that hurt my feelings, or oh, I gotta help my parent, or I gotta help my dad, or I gotta go do this and help them, and almost to like we're like tense, we're freaking out,
right,
we're stressed out, right? And we gotta sometimes stop and remember, like, wait a minute, like I would like to help, but my parent is a resilient person, is a strong person. Like I was raised by a strong woman. I was raised by a kind man, my kind dad. So it's okay. Like if my mom is having a bad day, that doesn't mean I have to have a bad day. My mom can handle a bad day.
Okay.
My sister can handle having anxiety. She can handle a lot of nerves, People like the loved ones that we have, like they can handle difficult situations. And so I think as a therapist, I think I try to remember that because I feel so much. I think I almost want to be like, how can I help? Or maybe I'll call again, or maybe I'll do this, right? And that's exhausting. And so I think when I go back to like first gen experience, like us, trying to live our life, or our parents do so much or sacrifice so much so that we can have a better life, right? But then really the disconnecting is hard, like I always laugh. I think about, my mom always wanted me to go and, get an education. But then when it came to like choosing a college, if it wasn't around the corner, she was like, we're going to go where? Like what? And so it's like, but wait a minute, I worked really hard so I could have these options, but you're saying it's too far, right? And so I think it's so much that we as first generation individuals are just like us as young adults, I think there's so much to navigate because it's like us in our role as adult children, us in our roles as siblings, as partners, like it's a lot. But I think that's where going to therapy, that's what we talk about.
Right.
We can talk about it, right? Like what's going on? Like what's going well? Tell me about, how would you like it to look like ideally? Right? And then also how does culture play a role in it, right? Because I think, like I said, it's like you can be direct, but also we got to take into consideration like what's culturally appropriate, right?
Right. I was just having a conversation with one of my sister's friends. I think a mutual friend between me and her.
Yeah.
He was talking about, because he also went to school. I think he is also a social worker. I might have him here too, because he just finished school.
Awesome.
He just finished all his clinical hours and stuff last week.
Oh,
so
good for him.
He was telling me that a lot of the time we have to whoever we're talking to and they're telling us their problem, we have to let them know that the problem is not who they are. Like they have to, like you have to distinguish
Mm.
who they are and the problem. Like
Yeah.
they're not the problem,
Mm-hmm.
and then go through those layers of breaking the situation down. During this pandemic, a lot of people used to lean on a lot of friends, a lot of family for support, and the pandemic happened. Now you're all by yourself. A lot of people became depressed or felt lonely.
Yeah.
What would you say to a person like that? Because I've had friends that have gone through these similar situations where they're trying to find themselves. Mm, me personally, I'd say like go talk to Kaelly, but
Good advice.
but in a position where you have a friend
Yeah.
that's talking about very dark things, like, and they're in front of you. I sometimes feel like responsibility to be like, oh, like, do this or do that.
Mm.
Would that be bad advice?
I think that when we love people, when we
Mm-hmm.
care about people, we jump to fixing.
Mm-hmm.
We jump, and that's the difference. You know how you asked me about like being a therapist?
Mm-hmm.
When I'm a therapist, I'm not there to fix,
Right.
right? When I'm a daughter, it's easier for me to be like, oh, I can help this way, right?
Right.
But I think when you think about a friend who's coming to you and sharing, that they're having a hard time, I think sometimes it's really about almost like asking for permission, like, hey, I'm here for you, and then being able to say like, would it be helpful for me to give you suggestions, on what I would do? I don't know if it would be helpful for you. Otherwise, I can just be here, and I can just listen.
Right.
I think that sometimes there's so much power in us
Just
listening, and
or being available.
being there, right?
Yeah.
Being there for somebody, or, like, hey, have you ever considered going to therapy? Like, why don't we, we could look together, right? Like, we could do stuff like that. Like, I don't know that we have to fix.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, I don't think anybody should take that, because it's a lot of responsibility.
Sure.
It's a lot of weight, because they might come at you and tell you, you don't know, you have no idea what I'm going through. You have,
Mm-hmm.
like, why would you even be telling me this stuff?
Yeah.
So I try to just kind of leave it to the professionals, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like it'd be great for me to be able to send people your way so that
Yeah.
you can talk to them.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I think like I mentioned, what's cool, like, not cool, but I guess something that came out of the pandemic is that,
Your accessibility.
yes, like I said, it's like I'm seeing people from all around
Mhm.
California, and I think that that's really, really cool. My dream one day, and I talk about it with Brandon, who's my business
Mhm.
partner, is to one day open up something out here in the desert to expand our
Practice.
business, yeah, out here. Because I think that growing up, I don't know that I really heard any talk about mental health, and I think that's a problem, because there is there is so many difficulties, and I think everyone should have access to it, but
Mhm.
not just access to it, but having access to something that can feel relatable, right?
Right.
Like somebody who can, like, you can sit down and be like, oh, like, this person may get me, and I think that that's what I hope to bring, is that I hope to bring, almost like just normalcy to therapy, or like, listen, like, when we call a therapist, it's scary. Like, what am I going to say? What are they going to ask me? What do I do? Right? Like, how scary. But for me, that's why when people come to me and it's their first time ever going to therapy, it is like the biggest honor, because I know how scared they must be on
Yeah.
the other end, right? And so I make it my goal to make them feel as welcomed as possible. That's why I use humor. That's why we crack jokes. Clients will say like, is it okay if I curse? I'm like, yes, it's fine. Express yourself, whatever
Right.
way, right? And so my hope is that with time, therapy can be something that all people feel is like going to the gym.
Right. Exercising that.
Like, bro, what are you doing today?
Right.
Oh, I'm gonna go hit up my therapist, right? Like, I dream of that. I also dream of a day where like I dream of a day where, like, I don't know, that there can be more confidence and vulnerability
Mhm.
among women and all people, right?
Mhm.
I think,
Men, for me, it's
and
like we're always taught to not have feelings,
mm,
to be strong.
yes.
Um, what's keeping you from making your way from LA over here, since everything is all Zoom or like
Hmm.
conference calls like that? Why are you out there?
Yeah. I mean, I think that I'm out there because I mean, really, I just made the transition from being with the agency that I was working
Hmm.
with and then doing private practice. I think that I also think, I am in a serious relationship.
Oh, okay.
And so, his work is also out there.
Oh, okay, okay.
Um, but because we can do this Zoom stuff, right? I think that eventually I would like to really have a physical office out here.
Hmm.
I would love to work with like the high schools and COD and just like create these mentorship groups. Really,
Say you're planting the seed.
I am planting the seed. I'm putting it out there, but I think todo a su tiempo, like
Yeah,
everything with
for sure.
time, but
It takes plants don't grow if overnight,
that's right.
So you
That's
gotta give it
right.
time, and even if that doesn't happen, I'm sure that you're gonna be successful in whatever you do. I
Thank you.
really appreciate you coming in. Is there anything else you'd wanna kind of
Hmm.
touch on?
Trying to think. I mean, you mentioned really briefly, men and mental health,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to highlight that because I think that you're right. So many men are taught to
Mm-hmm.
hold their feelings, to, if you cry, you're weak, if you get help, you're this, right? And I think that it takes a lot of strength to uh
Most definitely.
confront what's coming up for you. And I think that when, I do have men in therapy and they're awesome. I think it's so cool. And it's really amazing the transformation that you can see in all people. But when I think about men, for them to really be able to understand themselves, like, oh, I was doing that thing because that's my defense mechanism. You said that, Kaelly. That's my defense mechanism. Like, yes, it is. Or this is what happened with my wife or my girlfriend, and this is
Right.
what I said, and I don't know how to get out of this one, right? I just feel like men should also have a space where they can talk about what's happening for them, and it can be a confidential space, and it can be, like you said, like, this is the pressure I'm feeling in being the oldest son, and this is the pressure I'm feeling from that one time I failed, and this is the pressure I'm feeling to continue to be successful.
I'll put myself out there, and I'll give you my position right now.
Mhm.
We're getting ready to have a baby.
Mhm.
It's gonna be a difficult, what would you say, situation. Um, the baby's coming, and I have to be a certain way. Like, that's also having to battle what you said, like the mental health aspect of having to be the strong person, having to be. Right now, I'm in a position where I have to, like, my wife is at home, and I love the fact that she's just being a mother.
Yeah.
That's the most beautiful thing that she can do for me. She's my backbone. She keeps me strong, and I always like lean on that. A lot of men can't do that. A lot of men have to be super strong. No, fuck that. I gotta be the breadwinner. I have to, and for me, all that has shifted. I used to think similar to that.
Yeah.
Um, could you give me some advice going forward? Um, Being in the position that I'm in. I don't want to say too much, but because I'll start crying. But yeah, for sure. Is there any type of advice that you could give me as being in that, like, being in that position?
You're not alone.
Yeah, for sure. I know, and that's one of the most beautiful things is my family came together
Mm.
during this pandemic. Like, um, everybody's like showing so much love,
Mm.
and Monica gets so much feedback, and like, you brought a little nice gift over,
Oh, I was
so,
so
it's like,
excited.
yeah,
There's like all these cute things.
yeah.
Yes.
So yeah.
I think remember that you're in a partnership,
Hmm.
right? Take care of yourself. I think that as much as you're wanting to do probably a lot,
So much.
take time to slow down too. I think that that's advice that we could give to anybody. Sometimes when we're feeling stuck, we feel
Hmm.
like we have to do more. And sometimes it's better do less, right? Like,
Yeah,
like do
like, I can't
less.
sit in silence. Monica always tells me, like, you just can't be in silence, because then I'm in my head. I'm in my
Mm.
own head. Either blaring music, uh, I watch a lot of
What?
like
You're-
constitutionalists, so they're always fighting cops and stuff. Like I'm always,
I was like, what are you bringing up right now?
no, but I can't sit in silence. I'm either listening to a podcast. Like I work 3 jobs right now. I have 3 different jobs,
Wow.
and they're all very physical. Um,
Hmm.
so I'm making all these different transitions to get ready for the baby, but I can't. Like I have ADHD. I pretty much have ADHD. I have all that stuff. So I have 2 podcasts. Like I
Yeah,
can't
you're
just be
doing a
still.
lot.
But I know that as the baby like gets closer, all this stuff starts to mean less.
Mm.
And I don't want this position or this platform that I have to go away because I'm getting learning and
Yeah.
it's feeding me, like
Yeah.
helping me grow.
I think it's like also just for all people, but for you too. I think when you feel overwhelmed, go back to your values. Like, what are the things that really matter, and then make your choices for the day that way, you know?
Okay.
Like, sometimes we are trying to do 1,000,001 things, and I do this too. I think going into private practice, it's been a beautiful thing, but it's also been difficult because I've never done it before. And so I'm learning along the way too.
Mm-hmm.
And when I feel overwhelmed or when I feel stressed or when I am like, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? Right. I think I kind of sit down and think about like, wait, why am I doing this? Who am I doing this for anyway? Right. And then I feed my soul, right? Like you're talking about how this podcast for you, it's like, it's energizing for you. And so doing things that also feed your soul, like listening to music, but listening to music intentionally, like having a morning where, what, we had a really hard day yesterday and I'm gonna play some music, I'm gonna dance with my wife, we're gonna make some bomb breakfast. I just think really slowing down sometimes, especially when you're stressed out or when we are stressed out, and grounding ourselves with our values, grounding ourselves with the people that matter and care about us, and allowing yourself to feel, and I think also, I think in preparation for a lot of stress, like it's not a bad idea to seek out a therapist, right? I think what I can also share is, I think some people look for like men when I get, men, sometimes they'll be like, I didn't know how I was going to feel about going to a woman that's a therapist and talk about my feelings, especially because like we got like that macho or like I'm not gonna talk about my feelings to a lady, right? But there, and then that can be like a really powerful experience. For others, it's the opposite. Like I have Brandon. He also provides therapy, and I'll say like, hey, if you want to like be able to talk like to another guy, they'd be like, oh no, like I'm not gonna talk to a guy about my feelings. So I just think that there's options though, and I think that
like going to the doctor where you don't want another guy looking at you.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. Kind of like that. Or
yeah, have a lady doctor.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, that's funny. But yeah, I think there's nothing wrong with asking for support.
No, thank you so much. How can people reach you? How can they get their first session going?
Yeah. For people who are interested in working with me, they can, but there's multiple ways. I offer free 20-minute consultations.
Okay.
Mainly because I think that the most important thing about therapy isn't even just like what like, I mean, yes, like the skills that you're learning, but I think it's the relationship and how comfortable you feel with the therapist.
Okay.
So some therapists will offer like a free 20-minute consultation where you'd be calling, let's say, and you'd be like, hey, I'm calling because I'm interested in therapy, right? And I would say like, oh, great, David, like that's awesome. Like, tell me about what motivated you to reach out. No, well, my wife is pregnant, we're going through a lot. I'm just feeling really overwhelmed and stressed out. I just need some skills to kind of be able to manage, right? Cool, David, like that's something I can help you with. Or, you know what, David, that doesn't sound like something I can support you with. Let me link you with somebody who can. Right? Like, let me link you with somebody who can. You don't have to agree in that moment for therapy. You could just be like, okay, I'm gonna think about it. Right? But I think that really the biggest thing that you could get when you're calling a therapist is, how do I feel talking to them? Do I like their vibe?
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like, do I feel comfortable?
You're testing it out.
Yeah, like how do they make me feel? How do they respond to me? and then you proceed or don't, right? And so for people who want to work with me, I always say, like, let's first have a 20-minute consultation for a couple of reasons, so you can get a feel for, does it sound like I'm a good fit for you, right?
Okay.
You choosing, am
Right.
I a good fit for you? Because I don't think that we're for everybody, and that's okay, Also, for me to be able to share, like, you know what, that's something that I definitely feel like I can support you with, or you know what, that's not something I feel like I can support you with, but I will help you find somebody who can.
Okay.
Right? So that's what that 20-minute consultation would be. And then we just get started, right? We schedule a time. So if people wanted to get started with me, they could, multiple ways. They could reach out to me through Instagram. So my handle is Kaelly Talks Therapy, Kaelly Talks Therapy. Our business page is K, the word and B therapy. So K and B therapy. And on there, there's a link in our bio, and you would just set up a consultation, write your name down, your number, your email, and what therapist you want. So it'd be either me or Brandon.
Okay.
And then we would just have a consultation. And then we get started. So those would be like a couple ways. They could also reach me to my email.
Do you guys do any like workshops or anything like that?
You know what? I think it's something that we want to continue to do. So, and workshops are, yes, my answer is yes. We are intending to do workshops. We haven't set them out yet. We do hope to do some probably in August, is put out workshops. And I think that just, there's two different types. So there's like non-clinical, which would mean it's not therapy, it's really about building skills.
Okay.
And then there are clinical groups where it's like processing emotions, stuff like that. So there's two different types. And you could find that on our website, which is www.knbtherapy.com. And we'll be posting stuff on there like when we start, doing those workshops.
Sweet. I really appreciate your Instagram page. I follow it, and you're silly, you're very open, and it's very helpful because sometimes you're in your head and like you kind of bring a different angle on things, and kind of you give little tips on like just slow down, and like it's okay to feel down or not be in that day, and be checked out completely. But so yeah, guys, reach out to Kaelly.
Yeah, I'd love to work with everybody out here in the desert too,
Yeah.
I would love that. I'd love that. I do have clients from out here, and it's really special because I also think that the desert, to me, when I think about people out here, I think about hard workers. I think about people who are passionate. I think of community, and it's interesting because when I was in high school, I would drive on Dinah Shore, and I would see the mountain,
Right.
and I'd always think, like, man, I wonder what it's going to be like when I'm on the other side of the mountain. Like, I'd always be curious about the other side of the mountain. And now,
do you miss those mountains, like when you're out there?
I sure do. And
it's a big point of reference. Like, you look around and you see the mountain, you kind of feel
home.
grounded.
Yes.
And you're somewhere else, you're like, there's no mountains here. Like, how do people even live here?
Yes. And and I think, how you said, like, what would be, like, I was telling you that sometimes when I feel really overwhelmed, like, I kind of go back to my values and like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And are my values and my actions in alignment? Sometimes we have these values, but we're acting or doing things that aren't in alignment with it, and then we're like wondering, why am I so stressed out or anxious? Right? Like, but it's like, well, I'm not really investing in what's actually valuable to me, right? So, I think now, in addition to just doing those things, coming back to the desert is the most grounding, and it's like a reset button for me because I feel home. I've been out in LA for a long time, but there's nothing like the desert. And it's really cool because for clients that I have out here, we talk about streets, we talk about, like new things that are popping up, new restaurants, and just, it's cool. Like, we don't have to explain too much. Like, we get it.
Oh, okay. I'm glad that you made your way out here and you sat down with me, because it is true. Like, you are from this community, and you're out there empowering other people. We are from a very strong, small knit community, and so I hope that people reach out to you, and that you continue to, keep doing the beautiful work you're doing.
Oh,
so
thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for coming in.
Yeah, it's been so nice to talk to you and to reconnect. It's really, really cool, and thank you for doing this podcast. I think it's really awesome, and Yeah, you're planting seeds. That's amazing.
I hope that's the objective.
Yes.
It's just to not let people kind of get eaten up by this crazy times that we're having, and kind of ground people and empower people. So,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
See you next time, guys. We're out.
We're out.